Hey everyone, it's Jeff the Myopia Guy. So in today's video, we're going to go through how to tell if your child is at risk of getting myopia. So let's get started. So we're going to quickly go through the risk factors of getting myopia in the first place. So the first thing is if you look at things up close too much. So when I mean up close, I mean anything closer than a meter or so. So if you look at things too much, more than 2 hours per day after school, then you're definitely at risk of getting myopia. The second thing is not being outdoors enough. So if you're not outdoors at least 2 hours per day or 14 hours per week, then you're at risk. The third thing is family history. So if you have one or two parents having myopia themselves, then the child is more likely to become myopic as well. This is actually partly genetics, but partly also environmental, meaning that if the parents are more indoors person, if they're really looking at things up close a lot and not really being outdoors as much, usually the kid is more likely to adopt a similar lifestyle, which is why they're more likely to become short-sighted or nearsighted as well. Now here's how to tell if your child is at risk of getting myopia. So the first one is actually looking at their prescription. So the prescription actually tells you three things. So one is whether they're long-sighted or far-sighted. The second is telling whether you're short-sighted or nearsighted. The third thing is it tells you whether you have astigmatism. So astigmatism, bear in mind, is when your eyeball is a bit more oval in shape, so more like an egg shape. So what that does is it creates a bit more distortion when you look at an object, and it's actually very common or very normal to have astigmatism or low amounts of it at least. Now the reason why checking the prescription is actually one of the best ways to tell if your child is at risk is because when we're born as a baby, most of us is roughly about +2 in terms of long-sightedness or far-sightedness. So the reason for it is because when you're long-sighted or far-sighted, it's actually when your eyeball is too small. And that of course makes complete sense if you're a baby or a child. And so as we are born with roughly about +2 in long-sighted or far-sightedness, usually that number slowly goes down. And there is a norm or trend that, how it's supposed to grow. And so at a certain point when you're about the age of 12, we're expecting about 0 to about +0.5 in terms of long-sightedness or far-sightedness. So because we know the trend of how the long-sightedness or far-sightedness is supposed to grow, what that means is we know at a certain point or certain age, you're supposed to be this much long-sighted, for example. So if you're around the age of 6 or 7, we're expecting at least more than +1 in terms of long-sightedness. And if you're below that number, you're actually more likely to become short-sighted or nearsighted. This is because from the age of 6 to 7, we expect that long-sightedness to decrease by roughly about 0.25 every year or two. Of course, some kids will definitely grow much faster than that, which is why they're becoming myopic or short-sighted or nearsighted in the first place. This also means that regular checkup for your eyes is actually very important, because if we don't actually detect that long-sightedness or far-sightedness at a certain point, then it's very likely that your child will have too much change in between, and this is when they become short-sighted or nearsighted very fast. And so the recommendation is actually to at least have an eye test every single year. Some kids, we might even need to see them more often if they're definitely at high risk. Now, one tip for this section is that we do want to actually use an eye drop to actually do the eye test itself. So this eye drop is called a cycloplegic eye drop. So what it does is it sort of knocks off the eye muscles, the focusing muscles inside your eyes temporarily. And what that does is we can actually get a more accurate measure of the prescription once you use these eye drops. Generally speaking, the eye drop though, it does make your eyes more sensitive to light, and it does make things blurry for a couple of hours, sometimes a day or two, sometimes more than that, depending on the concentration. But that's actually quite important to do, especially if you're at high risk. Now, the second way of actually telling whether your child is at risk or not is actually by looking at their eyeball length. when I say eyeball length, I mean the eyeball length from back to front. The proper term for this is actually called actual length. So the reason why this is important is because short-sightedness or nearsightedness or myopia is actually when your eyeball grows too long from back to front. And so by looking at the actual length of the eyeball, we can actually graph your child onto a percentile graph. So in that way, we can know if your child is more at risk or not. So for example, if they have a longer eyeball and they have a higher percentile, maybe in the 95th percentile, for example, then they have a higher risk of becoming short-sighted. So to be able to measure the eyeball length or the actual length, we actually need an equipment called an ocular biometer. So an ocular biometer isn't something that most optometrists actually have at the moment. It probably will become more and more common in the future, but at this moment, even though it is actually the gold standard when it comes to managing myopia, it's not something that most optometrists actually have. And so one tip I can give you is that if you want to control your myopia or manage your myopia, I would highly recommend you to find an eye care professional with an ocular biometer. So there is a rate of change that we expect when it comes to the eyeball length. And so in that way, we can actually tell whether your child is becoming short-sighted very soon. So to help you tell whether your child is at risk of having myopia, I've actually developed a quiz called the Myopia Wellness Quiz. So it's in the link description below. Right, so in summary, there are 3 things we need to do to tell whether our child is at risk of having myopia. So the first one is to understand the risk factors. There are controllable risk factors, which is where the lifestyle is very important. If you need help modifying those lifestyle, please check this video. Of course, there are uncontrollable risk factors as well, which is what you need to determine to know whether your child is at higher risk or not. The second is we need to do regular eye checks to check their eye prescription, because if your prescription is at a certain level at a certain age, we can actually tell whether you're likely to become short-sighted or nearsighted or not. The third thing is to do regular eye checks to actually check their eyeball length, or what they call the actual length. Because if you're at a higher percentile or when you have longer eyeballs, that means you're more likely to become short-sighted, and that's when you need to be extra careful about these things. And the last thing, of course, is to find the right eye care professional for you. You need to make sure they know these cutoff values when it comes to your child's prescription, as well as preferably having an ocular biometer so they can check and track how long the eyeball grows. So if your kid is very close to becoming short-sighted, we can actually do something about it. Great, if you have any questions or comments, please comment down below, and looking forward to see you in the next video. Thank you.